basically every musical.
What is this? Breaking news?
Breaking news from Variety. Jon Stewart is to return to The Daily Show as executive producer and Monday night host. Correspondents will handle duties Tuesday through Thursday.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because we saw that he and Apple had political differences, and Jon Stewart's an important voice in America, and he needs a platform. Roy Wood Jr. the other day was in the background mouthing, hire a host. It's an important show. It's an especially important show this election period. And Jon Stewart lending his voice to today's politics as a guy, and I've told you this before, voted America's most trusted newsman over all the anchors when he was hosting The Daily Show. He usurped Brian Williams. Anyone who's got problems with the truth of media, this guy is at the forefront of being a comedian that people trust. If he runs for office, people would vote for him. He does a lot of work on good causes on the right side of history that no one would argue with, on getting first responders and military soldiers some health. So any platform that allows Jon Stewart to influence America with his voice and credibility would be welcome, because he is not just credible as a comedian. He's credible as someone who fights for the right side of things.
He actually was voted the most trustworthy news source?
By polling. Polling indicated of America as the trust in American media faded.
He was polling by Time Magazine.
He became the most trusted news source because he was doing a political show as comedy. We've seen around here, right? One of the things I do wrong all the time, the best way to attack this stuff is not sermonizing and screed. The best way to attack it is by satire. It's by welcoming people into the fun and pointing out hypocrisy. And over years, that show did it better than anybody. They were groundbreaking and pioneering because of that man. And then, for those of you who weren't paying attention, and this part's important because it's offensive if you care about real free speech and media doing its job. Jon Stewart was doing things for Apple that were too hot for Apple, even though it was just truth, fact, truth. And Apple ran him off because the corporations are taking over everything and they want their news to appeal to everyone because Republicans buy news too. And
not quite, too, because Apple was in a very tricky position given their corporate partnerships where they manufacture their goods. Artificial intelligence conversations put them in a difficult spot. It wasn't necessarily, in terms of like Apple TV consumers and where they reside on the aisle, that probably didn't make the medal stand.
You know what? Forgive me. You're absolutely right about this. But where it comes to corporate conflict and you want your media to not be compromised by capitalism, just do it that way. Because you're right. It's probably not on the list of things that Apple objected to, whatever. I think the reason his show was gone is something to do with China. I'm not sure of the details. I don't know that he's talked about this yet. I've been waiting to hear from him on what happened. But what he was doing on the Apple platform was more thorough and comprehensive and researched than anything that was happening in television anywhere. He was tackling subject matter that none of the other shows, not John Oliver, not Colbert, not any of his disciples, they were not tackling what he was tackling in long form, hugely researched, and it wasn't just politics. It was the economy. It was leadership distorting the difference between haves and have-nots. That show was brilliant, and not a lot of people were seeing it because it was behind a paywall, and he couldn't make it work with Apple because Apple has corporate compromises that it has to make that Jon Stewart is not willing to make.
Starlight Express, horny trains.
Phantom of the Opera was horny.
Every musical
Jon
is horny,
Stewart
Dan.
knows every animal's blood?
Put it on the poll. Is every musical horny?
Put it on the poll.
Yes.
And put it on the poll as well. Did Jessica
musical? Yeah.
just horny-splain to Dan? Because I fell asleep during Phantom of the Opera. Physically fell asleep while watching it.
As opposed to metaphorically.
Well, I'm not saying it. Yes, I'm not saying it as something
was your
that.
blood sleeping?